Today, I am going to have my CEO planning day where I will plan out primarily Q1 of 2025, but I'm also going to look at 2025 as a whole and look at my financial and business goals and map out my roadmap for what I want to do with all of my businesses. I'm sitting in my car. I'm about to go off to a coffee shop to sit down and grab some coffee, grab some snacks, and I'm going to do the first part of the planning day, which is to assess and reflect. I'm going to specifically focus on the last quarter, but looking back, taking the opportunity to look at the year as a whole and really see how far I've come in the last 365 days. I'd be lying if I said I was excited to do this. I'm kind of forcing myself into it, honestly. This is something that a lot of my clients say too when it comes to taking the time to do a CEO planning day. It's either they feel like they're too busy and they can't take a whole day off to focus on it, which is where I'm at right now. It's just a busy time with year end and getting clients ready over at Young & Co. But I'm taking the time anyways, and I'm kind of getting a little bit of a late start, to be honest, but we're going to do it, and I'm going to finish it in time to go to a party at my son's preschool this afternoon. All right, y'all, so I'm back in my office and we're going to go over my reflections from this past year. Before we dive into my reflections for 2024, I want to say it took me about an hour to go through and do all of this and sort of write it all out. There were two things that I have in place that make this really easy, and some of these things you're going to hear me talk about in terms of metrics are easy because I keep track of these things throughout the year. So one of those two things is my CEO dashboard or CEO scorecard. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm keeping track of certain KPIs in both of my businesses, primarily related to marketing, lead gen, and sales. Those tend to be my leading metrics that then result in the financial goals that I want. So I keep track of those on a weekly basis. I talked about these, I think, in the weekly planning video that I did a few months back. So if you want to dive into that, go check out that video. The other thing that I have is financials. Obviously, if you guys have been around for a while, my main business is a virtual CFO and accounting firm. And so, of course, I have to keep up with my financials because that's just what I do. I will say, I talked about this earlier in the year. I haven't always necessarily kept up with my own financials in the way that we do with our clients. And it's a good case of the cobbler's children have no shoes and also needing to take some of my own medicine. So acknowledging that, but I do have financials for the year. I also have a forecast for the year. And so that makes it really easy to go back and assess some of these things that I did in terms of metrics and financial results. All right, first up, we're going to talk through wins. I focused on the last quarter because I do this exercise every quarter. But looking back at the year as a whole, I would say my number one biggest win when it comes to business and life was probably that I took off 33 days from Young & Co. back over the summer. So it was a full month plus like a weekend or 2 weekends to get me to 33 days. I will say that that was a really great exercise for me, in terms of one, I just needed a break because 2024 was kind of a rough year. We'll talk about why in a few minutes. So I kind of just needed a break, but I also wanted to see what broke. It gave me kind of the time and space I needed to reset my nervous system a little bit, come back with fresh eyes, and sort of have a clearer picture of what was not working and what we could do to make things better, which we did. And I talked about this back in my last planning day video that I did. Although I will say when I did that back in September, I was only about a month back from being off for a month. I was still in the thick of it, y'all. I was still in the thick of it. I don't even think I realized fully how much I was in the middle of processing and still figuring out. I feel like now I'm still processing it, but I'm on the other side. I feel like we've put a lot of changes into place in the last 3 months that have all been for the good. So wins for Q4 2024, my biggest win from the quarter was that I got a new car. And so you might have heard me talk about my old car. It was a 2007 Honda Accord. I literally got her when I was a senior in college, y'all. I drove her from 2009 until 2024. So 15 years? She had almost 200,000 miles on her. She was like a fixture in my life, but I finally reached the point where I realized I needed to get a new car. I also recognize that my husband and I are going to keep making investments into things, and I was never going to want to choose to put like $50,000 straight down for a car when I could invest it in something else. So I'm not going to go too deep into like what I got and all this stuff, but I did end up financing it. So making the point here that all debt is not bad. I actually got a really great rate. It was 5.5%. The rate on the car that I got is actually just a little bit more than half of the rate that I have on my business loan from buying a business, which makes no sense to me why business loans are so high. It's also an SBA loan, so it's secured. I'm not going to go on a rant about debt and interest rates, but I did get a new car, and it feels like I'm sort of letting go a little bit of a car that saw me through college and my 20s and my first marriage, being in a bad relationship, corporate life, starting a business, doing all the things. I feel like I'm sort of now stepping into a new era, if you will, which is really fun. I also started therapy. So I've been going to therapy every week for a couple months now. I would say it's really starting to help me uncover some of the things that trigger me, some of the things that cause me to feel fear and stress and overwhelm and to make things mean a lot more than they really do. And so that has been good. I'm still working through stuff. I would say I'm definitely not like healed even after a few months of going every week. So we're going to keep doing that into Q1. I also completed a little restructuring that I did at Young & Co. So I think I talked about this back in Q3, but I ended up when I was out kind of reassessing the way that I wanted to run that business. And I actually wanted to split out Young & Co. into different service lines over a year ago, and I had multiple people tell me that I shouldn't, that it would be too confusing, too much to manage, whatever. And I listened, and I wish that I had gone with my gut, because my gut honestly doesn't usually lead me astray. But we sort of completed that restructuring in terms of everything from like a website, marketing funnels, to team structure, financial reporting, all the things. We've completed that, and it took a good bit of work, but I feel really good about the way that things are positioned going into 2025. Along those lines, I also decided the week of the election to sign up for a CFP, Certified Financial Planner study program, and to take the exam in March. This is something that has been on my mind for literal years. I see a severe need with a lot of our clients for financial planning. And I only really know a couple of financial planners who I feel comfortable referring business owners to, but it's something that I really want to bring in. And I'll talk more about like my vision and my goals for 2025, but it just really nicely aligns with that vision that I have of wanting to provide more holistic financial support for business owners so that we're not just like throwing spaghetti at a wall. In Q4, we go through this process with our CFO clients of creating forecasts and budgets for the year and setting goals. And pretty much anytime I ask one of these clients, how much money do you need to take home? What are your financial goals, personal goals? What do we need to make in the business in order to fund these things? A lot of them can't answer it. It just made me feel like it was going to continue to be important to help women business owners be able to make more money, both with the coaching support I'm doing, obviously still going to keep doing that, but also on the done for you side to be able to provide that support as well. So I'm excited for that. It has been a lot of studying so far, but I'm hoping to take the test in March, and it's honestly the last thing that I have to check off to be able to get that certification and create another third business line so that we really truly do have a holistic support group with all of our teams and services that we offer for business owners. I also decided at the end of Q3 on the coaching side in that business to start doing profit share instead of just regular one-on-one, like the regular private support that you do, because it more aligns with my vision and my values for the way that I want to work with clients. So I started that and started clients in that in Q4. And that has been really interesting. I'm excited to see, results of that going into 2025, because I feel like having a profit share, it makes me that much more invested, because if my client isn't making money, profit, meaning like after they pay their expenses, after they pay themselves, what's left over. If they don't have any left over, then I'm also not getting paid. And so it just sort of aligns our like incentives and goals together. Buckle up, because I have a lot of stuff to talk through, okay? The next thing that was a win was I finally sent a pitch for a podcast, which sort of broke my dry spell in terms of pitching things. You probably heard me talk last quarter about speaking being one of my goals and how I just kept procrastinating, delay. And so this quarter, instead of going straight into speaking, I went back to something that I'm definitely comfortable with, which is podcast interviews. And I finally sent a pitch, which was kind of like breaking the ice, taking a small step forward. So my goal in Q1 is to keep doing podcast pitches, but also to work up to doing more speaking. A couple other super quick wins for Young & Co. We actually started up producing content more consistently between blog posts and emails. Social media is next on my radar for Q1. And so I feel good about that because we never really consistently put out content in the past. We also just did so much process work over there, primarily on the tax side. This was one of those things that I really saw when I was out for 30 days that it's just something that we needed to leverage software. We needed to leverage our team and standardize processes to make things run more smoothly. My ultimate goal has always been to enable my team, empower my team to be able to do the work that they do it efficiently, do it with high quality, do it with high accuracy, obviously. And so we put a ton of work into it. We are not really going to see the fruits of all of that labor until Q1 and Q2 when we're deep into tax season, but I think it's going to go well. We'll see. I also, under my coaching umbrella, I put my money where my mouth is, and I'll talk more about why I did this in a few minutes, but I set up my own microservice funnel, which you might have heard me talk about a few weeks ago here on my YouTube channel or podcast, but I set up my own. I did the low lift version, so it is not built out. It is not super fancy. It doesn't have all sorts of steps in the funnel, but I did build it out. I very quickly, when I put my microservice out there, was able to book calls with people and get some clients in the door. It feels funny to be talking about my sales strategy in a place where like I want people listening to also like book a call with me if you feel aligned with it. But I'm just keeping it real that I feel like I tried a lot of different strategies in all of 2024 that frankly for me just did not work as well as the high ticket offers and microservice funnel is going to work, and I know it's going to work. Under the wins bucket, going back for all of 2024, I also wrote down some of my best investments for the year. I made several investments into different service providers, programs, and some of them worked really well. Some of them did not give me a good return. Before I talk about investments, looking back at my expenses, I cut out under Young & Co. I have almost no expenses under my coaching umbrella. But under Young & Co., I cut out almost $15K a month from Q1 average expenses to Q4 average expenses. We cut almost $15K a month in expenses because, again, about middle of the year, I was like, we're doing too much. I've got too much overhead. I need to scale things back. I need to pare things down. And so we did. And that has been a really great thing to be able to see some pickup in terms of cash flow in the second half of the year. But of course, keeping the investments that worked really well. One of them I would say is having our COO, who might be listening to this, but she actually has come in and helped us do so much of the systems work and automations and processes. And this is something that not that I can't be organized, I just really don't like it that much. And so I avoid it. And so it's really nice to have somebody to sort of give us a roadmap for what we need to implement and how to do it. And so that I will say has been one of my best investments. Continuing coaching, because again, I think I can help people overcome their roadblocks all day long. But sometimes when it comes to my own stuff, I need somebody else to hold me accountable. And so that continues to be one of my best investments. Therapy has been a really good investment in Q4. And then in terms of time and energy, when I look at where all of my clients come from, both for Young & Co. and in the High Profit Society and private clients, pretty much all of them come from referrals and come from people that I have met. And so investing my time and energy into relationships, into real human conversations is, and it continues to be, the thing that has given me the best ROI. All right, next I'm going to run down my goals that I had, that I talked about these. I think I talked through these in my Q3 planning video. Goal number 1 was podcast YouTube growth. I continue to post consistently. We're actually coming up on almost 3 years of the podcast. And so we continue to post weekly. Overall, my audience grew primarily on YouTube, but I will say my views were down. This is one that I haven't really dug into yet why this is the case, and I'm probably going to rely on some of the experts that I have in my corner to help me understand. I don't pretend to understand how YouTube really works yet, which is kind of funny if you're watching me on YouTube, but we're testing it out. I would say even though that didn't necessarily grow substantially in Q4. I'm still seeing a better return in terms of audience and engagement and things on YouTube as compared to some of the other channels. Goal number 2 was to promote our tax business line. So we separated out our CFO from our tax business line. The goal was to, thinking about 2025, I wanted to take on a certain number of clients. So we did get quite a few new tax clients in Q4, but I ended up about halfway through Q4, I ended up pivoting a little bit. And I'm not going to go into detail about all of it now, but we decided to do another acquisition that will close hopefully like by the time this video comes out or shortly thereafter. And so with that coming in, I decided not to take on a ton of new tax clients just because we need to leave space to integrate all of those clients in Q1. Goal number 3 was Instagram growth. Instagram is one of those channels where I feel like I put effort in and then it really didn't pay me back, which I know has been a lot of people's frustration with Instagram in 2024. I know that there's ways to find success on Instagram, but I also at the same time, I would say I would have needed to put a lot more energy into content creation, into testing out different things than I was able to devote in Q4. And so this is one of the things that I will say going into Q1, I've already started putting the pieces in place for this. What I have found is that instead of me putting a lot of energy into constantly creating new content for social media in general, I'm going to do what I tell my clients to do, again, taking my own medicine and going back to leveraging the long form content that I'm already creating that I know works when I put energy into my podcast and my video podcast, even my email newsletters. I'm going to go back to prioritizing those and then getting support from a team in repurposing those into social media content. So we've already put a process in place to give me sort of a baseline of posts every week, short form posts from repurposed long form content that I don't have to create from scratch. This, I kind of put it in the same bucket as when I started working out and I got up to the place where I hired a personal trainer, and that worked really well because I had someone else kind of there to do the plan, my workout plans, to tell me what to do. I just kind of had to show up. I kind of put this in the same sort of category as that for me personally. That's just like how I work and what works best for me. So we're going to test out doing 3 posts a week on Instagram from repurposed content. So that way I have something going out, even if I'm in a busy time or a low energy period and I don't feel like I have anything else to say, I will still have content going out the door from my long form content. Goal number 3 was tax content. So more content, right? So promoting the tax offer that we revamped last quarter. And we actually did do blogs. I started blogging and then sending out an email newsletter bi-monthly, which, side note, if you want to go sign up for that, I will put the link in the YouTube channel. But this content under Young & Co is going to be heavily obviously focused on financial stuff and tax stuff versus my own personal newsletter is kind of just whatever's on my mind, business, money, mindset, all of it. But I like to think we put out some good valuable stuff for our newsletter subscribers. And so we did that. And then after I feel good about my personal Instagram content planning and batching that I'm getting support with, we're going to try to do the same thing for Young & Co so that we have content going out that I don't have to create from scratch. Okay, goal 5 was to really focus on optimizing my tax team and systems, which I definitely feel like we did. We checked off all the things that I wanted to do, even with, I talked about this in Q3 with the pivot of hiring a tax strategist who then did not stick around. We still pivoted and I took back on some of the work, but we put a lot of work into our systems that I'm really excited about. Check on goal number 6, I started therapy. Goal number 7 was to do more cardio, which I really didn't do much of in October, November, but over the last 2-3 weeks, I have done 1x a week cardio. And I've also used my walking pad a lot more at my desk here. And so I would say we're doing the thing there. And then my last goal was home stuff, was just like an overall declutter. I still didn't come up with a good routine that I can do on a daily basis, but I did do more like big spurts of things when I had a good bit of free time, and that kind of worked. We got a good bit of stuff out of the house that needed to happen. So in terms of metrics, I always like to go back to my financials and my dashboard and just kind of see what happened. I like to track reach and audience size for me. So reach across all platforms was actually pretty much consistent with Q3. Although some of the channels were down, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, podcasts were down a little bit, but Threads, interestingly enough, was like through the roof. I actually had one of my posts on Threads get like 80,000 views. I took it out of my stats because it was totally not business related at all. If I included it, my average weekly reach would have doubled from Q3. Threads is an interesting place. I would say followers on Threads also increased about 10% in Q4. I went into Q4 just saying, I'm going to play with Threads. I didn't have a strategy. As I set my goals, I'm going to make it a strategy because I think that it is showing signs of being a platform where you have an opportunity to get in front of non-followers, which I think is what is so hard about Instagram. And then revenue goal wise, I set pretty reasonable, conservative revenue goals for Q4, and we hit both of them. And so I feel good about it. I didn't necessarily blow it out of the water, but I hit the goals that I set. We were able to do the things we wanted to do, pay the things we needed to pay. And so I feel pretty good about revenue goals overall. As part of my goal setting process, I'm going to revamp my Q1 goals, but I still think for Q1, I'm just not really feeling setting like some huge number. Like I really just want it to be attainable. I feel like looking back at 2024, what I wrote down is that I felt like I was beating my head against a wall for a large part of 2024. If I could look back at all of the years that I've had in business since I started in December 2018, so we're right at 6 years, I think 2024 was one of the hardest years in business, aside from 2020 having, going through COVID and also having a newborn and also going full time that year. That was really hard, but for different reasons. This year, I think, was hard for a variety of reasons, but it was more so internally hard. Like I feel like I had to go through a lot and shed a lot of things and let go of things and really simplify and focus in on what works. I feel like looking back at 2024, I felt like I put in a lot of effort into things and did not get the return that I wanted to get. But at the same time, I can say I probably was also not as consistent as I could have been. And so, of course, if you're not being consistent, then you're probably not going to get the results you want. But kind of taking everything that happened in 2024 into consideration, my plan, my focus for 2025 is going to be to go back to what works, go back to the basics of what has always worked for me in the past, which is high ticket offers, monthly recurring revenue, building relationships with people, having human conversations, focusing less on digital online sort of marketing. Not that I'm going to let it go completely, but really putting a focus on going to events, doing more networking, having more lunches with people, getting into more conversations with people. Like those are the things that have historically worked the best for me. And when I am doing those things, I make more sales, we bring in more clients, we serve people better. One other focus area for me going into 2025 is, again, relying on my team, continuing to build out systems, just trying to continue to streamline things and deliver at a high quality as I, especially with the Young & Co side of things, step out more and more of client work. And one other thing that I'm probably going to do some podcast episodes on in 2025 is how can I leverage AI to do that? Because it's definitely not going away. We already use it to an extent, but not in a lot of ways. And so I'm just thinking about how can we use some of the latest software? How can we use AI to improve quality, improve efficiency, to help my team not be, overworked or anything like that, and just to help us improve things all around and deliver more value to clients. And so having to spend less time on busy work, more time on the big picture stuff that really matters. Again, building relationships, taking care of our clients. Like how can we do those things better? And I think there's ways that we're going to be able to use both software and systems, but also some AI tools in 2025. So the last thing I'm going to say before I break and go, I need to go get some lunch because I went to a new coffee shop and it was good, but they didn't have real food. And so I'm hungry. So I'm going to break for lunch and go do that. The next phase that I like to take clients through in the planning process is vision setting. I kind of revisited my vision. It doesn't change much quarter over quarter. The one thing that I would say is new or that I'm re-emphasizing is going back to the impact that I want to have on clients through all of my businesses. And that is helping more women have more money from their businesses and build wealth And so my goal is 100 women business owners, helping them grow to 1 million in net worth, which would be $100 million of wealth created from their businesses collectively, which I think would just have an astounding impact on our communities and on the world. This is a goal that I actually had for a while, and then I was like, it's too big, it's too much, like there's no way I can do this. Again, going back to some of the like doubt and fear and stuff that came up for me in 2024, it's just something I went back to over Q4, and I do think it's really important. Like if I was to have a life's work, like this would be it. And so what you're going to see is everything that I'm going to do is going to come through that lens of how can we make more money in our businesses, scale up in a sustainable, profitable way in order to build wealth, like yes, in financial terms, but also in terms of life, because I want us to be able to live our lives, not chasing money all the time, obviously still making a good bit of money, but also being able to step away and having time freedom while we are building these amazing things. And so that is my vision for what I really want to focus on in 2025. And I'm going to do that under Young & Co. through the CFP, having a financial planning offer built in that will be like a done for you, obviously very money focused service, which I'm really excited about. And then under, my coaching, teaching, mentoring work, again, like layering those things into that work we're doing over there, but taking a bigger picture view of like the mindset and embodiment. And how do you build your business in a way that enables you to have both financial and time freedom? That's what we're going to work on. So I have been going on for a long time now. I told you this was going to be a lot because I feel like I have had so much change in the last quarter. I'm going to go grab some lunch. I'm going to take a little rest and then come back and do the goal setting roadmap portion of my CEO day. All right, I am back for the goal setting portion, and I'm going to try to walk you through how I set my financial goals for the year. If you've been around for a while, you probably have heard me say that when it comes to goals, I really do not like to set New Year's resolutions. I think that for a variety of reasons, we're setting ourselves up for failure when we set New Year's resolutions because we're not focusing as much on the habits and the underlying behavior change that has to be put in place for New Year's resolutions to succeed. And a lot of times we think that overnight we're all of a sudden going to become a different person and start doing a ton of different things differently. And that lasts for all of a week or two. And then we go right back to what we were doing before and never actually make progress. So when it comes to goals, I like to kind of have two sets of goals that I'm working on. The first is my big picture vision, which I've already kind of revisited, but my big picture vision, including my biggest goals and things that I'm working toward, I do not put a timeline on those. Instead, what I do is I like to break these down into my quarterly goals so that I can continue taking steps towards those goals week in and week out. And ultimately, you'll look up one day and realize I'm doing the thing that I had in my vision without necessarily even realizing that you're there. So I like to set my vision, which doesn't change that drastically quarter over quarter. And then in terms of quarterly goals, I like to ask myself, what are the biggest, most impactful focus areas that I need to prioritize in this upcoming quarter? And I will set those, create a roadmap for those, and then use those when I do my monthly and weekly planning to make sure that, again, every single week, I'm getting a little bit better. I'm taking steps towards doing all the things that I want to do. Now, the only caveat, and I think this is coming from working as a virtual CFO for all these years, is that I really like to have annual financial goals. And again, I don't necessarily tie myself to these, but I do like to sort of create a model going into the year for what I think my 2025 financials are going to look like. And this is something that we do for our CFO clients. So acknowledging that a lot of business owners are not comfortable making forecasts like this, but obviously I am. And so I try to walk my clients through this too in the High Profit Society, which we did in our quarterly planning day that we just had last week. So the way that I like to set my financial goals when I'm going into a new year is this. I'm going to try to walk you through this without a spreadsheet, which it's not going to be the easiest thing. So if you don't fully follow along, I recommend that you go grab my sales plan and pricing tool, because in there is a calculator that's going to help you put your numbers in and see what your revenue target is. When I'm thinking about financial goals, I like to ask myself, okay, in the year, what are the things that I want to have money available for? And I like to bucket these in terms of my ongoing pay that just covers my bills, discretionary spending, so thinking about vacations, thinking about home upgrades, maybe a new car, right? Like discretionary spending money. I like to think then also about savings and investment goals. When I think about this, I do like to think about it for both my business and my personal life, because I just kind of think about all of my money buckets a little bit holistically, I guess. And so in there, I will put business savings, personal savings, business debt, personal debt, investments, whether that is a business investment I want to save up for, or investments that I want to make personally to have the money to put into something. But I will write all of those down, kind of just brain dump it out, and then I'll add it all up. And basically, this is the amount of profit that I want my business to be generating, right? Now, there are best practices in terms of benchmarks and profit margins and all of that I'm not going to go into right now. But putting your goals together is kind of like a big puzzle. And so what we do is we take the profit goal, I add a buffer for taxes on top of that, and then I will go and look at my budget for the year and say, okay, here's what my expenses will be in my business. And so I'll have my profit goal plus taxes plus my expenses, and then that gets me to, this is the amount of revenue that I need to have coming in this upcoming year in order to make everything work. So I like to do that on an annual basis. And for me, I have a little bit of extra complexity because at Young & Co, we have 2 business lines. So I broke that down into like the total revenue goal that I needed. I broke that down into a revenue goal for both business lines and then a revenue goal for my personal brand. And instead of saying, I'm going to go and take that annual revenue goal for my business and split it up into a monthly number, just divided by 12, I actually like to ratchet it up throughout the year. And so I like to take percentages. So instead of saying like Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 is going to be 25% of the revenue goal each, because if the revenue goal is higher than what I'm doing now, I understand that I may not get there immediately in Q1. Like it's going to look like this throughout the year. So I like to split it up, and you can kind of play with it, but I like to maybe do like 15, 20, 30, and then 35% in across the quarters. And so starting with Q1 and saying, okay, 15%, maybe I'm not generating enough in revenue at taking 15% of my annual goal to fully cover all of my discretionary, my investments, my savings. But at a minimum, I definitely want to make sure that I'm covering my pay goals. Either way, I'm going to take my revenue target and sort of break it down into chunks for quarters. And so for Q1, I went through and I did that, and I set a revenue goal for each of my business lines. Currently, I have 3. I'm actually not setting a revenue goal for a potential future financial planning business, because that will be like a separate thing that I do. For the CFO business, my goal by the end of 2025, I want to get that business line up to being a 7-figure business line on its own. I want to be at $80,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue from CFO clients as a standalone. For taxes, after any potential acquisitions that we have coming in, my goal, I'm sort of giving myself a range of making 40 to 50K in new sales, which is honestly pretty doable for us at this point. And then for my coaching and teaching, it kind of ended up with the math where I don't necessarily quote unquote have to make a huge revenue goal from this. And so I'm kind of looking to just sustain the revenue that I did, which honestly at this point in time feels really easy. I might come back later in the year and say, you know what, if I'm going to put my energy into this, I want it to make money like my other businesses are making me money. But for right now, it doesn't feel like a top priority. But I took those individual goals for Q1 and I said, okay, taking the CFO business line, I want to get that to 80K a month in monthly recurring revenue by itself. I'm not going to expect to get there in one quarter. And so breaking that down into milestones. And so for Q1, adding a certain number of new clients to get us to that first milestone. And then for the tax clients, same thing, broke that down into a Q1 chunk. And then for the High Profit Society and my profit share, setting a goal of bringing on a couple of new clients there too. So that's kind of how I like to think about goal setting, and still having that long-term big picture vision in mind that has really big goals, and asking myself, even if I'm not necessarily for Q1 setting a revenue goal that's like a ton of growth over where I am now, asking myself, how am I serving clients? How am I building relationships with people? How am I living in alignment with the vision and the values that I have through this work that I'm doing is what is important to me as I think about Q1. So with those goals in mind, I kind of brain dumped things that I need to work on in each of my business lines and tried to prioritize my top 5 goals. Now, when I set goals in terms of like my action items, I'm kind of using that word a little bit loosely. So if you think about outcome goals, those are going to be the lagging metrics, right? We have leading metrics and lagging metrics. And when I think about lagging, meaning these are the things that happen after the fact, those are primarily going to be like sales and financial metrics. So when I set my goals to create my roadmap for the upcoming quarter, I'm focusing on the actions that I need to take, which are the leading metrics or the inputs. These are looking at, I'm going to take the sales goals that I have and ask myself, okay, how am I going to sell these clients? What are the lead generation, marketing, and sales activities that I need in order to hit those goals for each of those business lines? And then are there any new projects? Is there anything I need to refine? Is there anything I need to put time and energy into? And really, those are my action items. And really, when I set new goals for a quarter, I like to limit it to 5. I don't use one of those 5 for me to like reiterate or redo things that I'm already doing. Like, for example, for podcast recording, I already have a pretty good process. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. I know that I'm going to be able to do the podcast, and this doesn't necessarily it does take energy, but it doesn't necessarily take a ton of energy for me. And so I don't set that as one of my goals or focus areas because I know that that's already built in. I like to think about new processes, new routines, new habits, new behaviors. Like, what are the things that I want to prioritize? So when I did this, I brainstormed 8 things that I put as top priority and prioritize only the top 5 things that I want to take action on. And even within that, I'm going to prioritize those so I know like this is the number 1 most important thing that I'm doing. The top priority that I have is in Q1 to support my team and clients, because we have done so much work over the last 3 to 6 months in processes and systems. And January through April is a really, really busy time for both our CFO team and our tax team. And so my goal is going to be to support them, to help troubleshoot the systems, just to be able to jump in where I can to make sure I'm touching base with them. In a lot of the actual integration work, like they're doing it. And so it's not necessarily on my plate to do that, but I just want to make sure that I prioritize taking the time to monitor, to assess all of it, to talk to clients and get feedback and see how all the changes we're making are flowing through to them. The second goal I have is to integrate the business that we are working on buying that I'm expecting to close January 1st. So I'll talk more about that later after it closes and after we integrate it and communicate to all the clients. But I think that's going to be a heavy lift. Again, something that I'm expecting my team to take a lot of the lift in terms of doing the work, but I still want to make sure like I'm putting a chunk of money into it. I want to make sure that it goes smoothly, especially with the lessons learned from the last accounting firm that we bought and integrated. We learned a lot of lessons. And so just making sure that we do things a little bit differently to make it run more smoothly. Goal number 3 is I am going to do my own challenge, which is my 100 touch challenge. I have this inside the High Profit Society. My goal is to do this to help me kickstart to having more conversations, building more relationships with people. And so within that challenge, doing more networking, going to events, talking to people, just being more visible and having more conversations. And I think that across the board, anytime I do one of these, I make connections, I bring new clients in the door. And so that's why it's goal number 3, because I think that it will go a long way toward hitting our revenue goals. Goal number 4 is the CFP exam. So I already talked about how I signed up to study for that. My goal is to take that in March. I put this toward the bottom of my priority list though, because if I need to, I can push this off to July, but I'd really like to take the exam in March because it's the last thing I have to do to get my license. And then I can go through the process of setting up an entity, finding hopefully a financial planner person or like a para planner who can help us actually execute the work. Side note, if you are one of these people or you know one, hit me up. But I'd like to have the exam passed in March so that we can spend the bulk of the slower summertime in doing some like initial clients in this new business line. And then goal number 5 is threads. So I talked about, as I reviewed my metrics, where I seem to get the best reach, the best results, starting conversations with people. And out of everything that I did in 2024, I would say in terms of return on energy, I put basically no energy into threads and I booked calls off of it, y'all. And so I'm going to go and work on creating a strategy for threads and posting there more consistently. And then, the second content channel that has worked well in 2024, I think, was YouTube. And so continuing that, I'm going to rely on my team. I said earlier I wanted to dig into, how we can improve the reach and growth on YouTube. This is one that I'm definitely going to delegate because I would say this is not my area of expertise, nor do I necessarily want to learn it. So that is it for my CEO planning day. What I'm going to do after this is I'm going to take each of those goals and break them down into action steps that are going to live in my planner. And then every single week when I do my weekly CEO time, I revisit those goals. I ask myself, okay, which of these action steps am I going to work on this week so that I can continue moving forward? But I'm going to do that later because I've got to leave in like 20 minutes to go to a little kid Christmas party. So I will do that at a later date, but hopefully this was helpful to sort of hear the behind the scenes of what is happening with me as a business owner with multiple businesses and what I'm seeing happening, what my priorities are, and the things that I want to happen in 2025. So as you're listening to this, take the time, if you haven't done so, to go and map out your CEO planning day or like to have a CEO planning day. I said at the beginning, it's hard to set aside the time to do this, and I fully acknowledge that because of a variety of reasons. It can be hard to set aside an entire day to focus on this, to really dig into looking at what was working well, what did not work well, and to acknowledge the things that you didn't do as well or the goals that you didn't hit. But also, I think it's just so important to take the time to do this, to be able to take more intentional action in the upcoming year and the upcoming quarter, rather than just flinging spaghetti at the wall and having no strategy and hoping that somehow it's going to work out. So I hope that this was helpful, and I will see you back next time.